Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make final decisions on all matters before the Commission other than site plans. The Commission's decision to approve or deny a site plan is the final decision by the City unless the applicant appeals to the City Council. You'll need to contact the City Clerk or Community Development Department staff for details on those council hearings. This evening, the applicants will be given 10 minutes to present their request after staff presentation. Proponents and then opponents are allowed to speak, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. The applicant will then be allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed, and after a motion, the Commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the issue under consideration, and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed, and there is none on it for tonight, but I understand we'll be moving some on, and will be considered for approval in accordance with recommendation in the staff report unless an individual present or a member of the Commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda and separately considered under the public hearing agenda. The City of Des Moines is pleased to provide accommodations to individuals or groups with disabilities and encourages participation in city government. To better serve you when possible, please notify us in advance 3 business days at area code 515-283-4209 should special accommodations be required. Assistive listening devices are also available for the meetings in the council chambers. Planning and Zoning Commission meetings are broadcast on Mediacom Cable Channel 97-1 or Channel 86 for digital service customers. The broadcast is also streamed live in real time on the City of Des Moines website at www.desmoinesgov.org. You'll need to check the Watch Live link for those meetings. Kathy, do we have a quorum? Quorum being present, is there a motion on the minutes?
I move.
Okay.
So move.
Any discussion?
I abstain.
All right, one abstention. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, same sign. We have a motion to move some items on to the consent agenda. Greg? 2, 3, 4, and 5. Does everybody have that? Let me run over this for people in the audience. 2 is a review and recommendation to the City Council regarding the proposed Riverbend Local Historic District located generally in the area on both frontages of 6th Avenue from University Avenue to Hickman Road, the area on both frontages of Oakland Avenue and Arlington Avenue between College Avenue and Franklin Avenue, and the area north of Franklin Avenue to Des Moines River between Arlington Avenue and 6th Avenue. Is there anyone here in opposition to that item tonight? In opposition? All right. Request from, item 3, I'm sorry, is request from CDG Merrick Properties LP. Macerich? Macerich.
Yeah,
Macerich Properties, represented by Chet Cramen for review and approval of amendment to the C4 development plan for Southridge Mall on property located at 1111 East Army Post Road to redevelop a portion of the mall in the vicinity of the food court as a 133,707 square foot area. Wow, easy enough for you to say. Retail office assembly uses access from the outdoor plaza on the north side of the mall and 94,000 square foot area for athletic fitness assembly uses on the west side of the mall. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to that item? In opposition to the item? Seeing none. Number 4 is a request from KG Store 373 LLC, represented by Charles Campbell, for an amendment to the Come and Grow Store 573 PUD concept plan for property located at 5830 Southeast 14th Street to allow for the sale of alcoholic liquor as a permitted use in addition to the permitted gas station convenience store use. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to that particular item? Seeing none. The last one is item number 5, request from Hawkeye Tack and Western Supply, represented by Donald Hanson, for review and approval of a site plan under design guidelines for vehicle display lots on property located at 720 East 30th Street to allow display and sales of horse trailers. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to those items? Is there anyone here who has questions about what item you're here for?
So are you here for 5? Are you Donald? Are you okay with the staff recommendation, the conditions?
Need a couple clarifications on them. Otherwise, yeah, I don't have any problems.
Just to talk through them?
Yeah, just need a little clarification on what you're...
For tonight or?
No,
we can talk about, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
So does he want it removed, or?
No, he said that we could.
We'll work through it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We have a motion?
What about 6?
I understand. Is there anyone here on 6? Item number 6?
Yeah, the applicant is here tonight. There's just one point of difference between the staff recommendation and what the applicant would like to do. There's a segment of sidewalk that we were recommending be 6 foot wide, which is kind of more of our standard for a commercial area to allow for the heavier pedestrian traffic versus a residential street. The applicant would like to continue to utilize a 4 foot wide sidewalk. They would improve it, but they like to stick with that 4 foot wide. So that's the difference, and they were hoping to speak to you on that.
All right.
It will be, I think, a short item once we get to it. But
All right. We have items number 2 through 5, and the request is to move them to consent. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving 2 through 5 to consent, please signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, same sign. One abstention. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move consent. Greg's motion. Got it? No, I know we're rushing. I'm sorry, got it. It's easy for us. We just have to talk. We don't have to do any writing. All right, ready? Okay. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, same sign. One abstention. Okay. All right. Moving right along. Let's go on to the... Oh, all right. I would wait a moment.
Wow.
I didn't realize we had that many people.
I know it.
And now that the room's empty, no. No. Hey, Jason, while we're doing that, Joanne had asked if we could have, some semblance of a presentation on 3 if there's anybody still left here to... I think she was just...
is anybody here still for 3? They're gone.
All right.
Well, you can say some remarks if you like while I shuffle files.
You have some remarks, Joanne? That's okay. If
Okay, I can do that.
Joe, Jim Ballard is still writing the vestibule. If you want to bring him back here. Yeah, we should have kept it on. Yeah. They're gone.
Why don't I just flash up this pretty picture here while I get the files in order for the next item?
I don't think that's appropriate with the public on. Okay, sorry.
I think they just want to brag.
Yeah. We should have done with the public hearing. While Jason's getting the file, I'll kind of give a summary of what's before you this evening. This rezoning request has actually been before the Planning Commission on 2 previous occasions. The first time it was before the Commission, the applicant had requested M1 light industrial zoning on the property to expand the storage use. It was to include, at that time, some RV camper storage capabilities on the site. They subsequently amended their request to request a limited C2 zoning on the property. And once again, that was then just to expand storage units like what they have on their existing property. The Plan and Zoning Commission at that time recommended denial of the limited C2 zoning request for the expansion area. It went on to the City Council, and in the interim, prior to the council hearing, there were some discussions about an amended request. At one point, there was discussion about leaving the north 120 feet of the property, so fronting on Mahaska Avenue, zoned, to leave that zoned as R160. The applicant subsequently indicated they could not agree to 120 feet, but they could agree to 100 feet. So at the council hearing on the rezoning, the applicant had signed a letter of acceptance of a condition that would say that the north 100 feet would remain zoned R160 to allow the potential, at least, for future single-family residential development. At the hearing, the council decided to, because there had been a recommendation of denial by the Planning Commission, and because the Planning Commission had not considered the idea of leaving a portion, a northerly portion zoned R160, that it should be referred back to the Planning Commission for an additional hearing and input as to whether or not that would change any recommendation or not. They just wanted to have another hearing on the issue of the amended request and then forward that recommendation to the City Council. Currently, the proposed schedule, if the Planning Commission makes a recommendation this evening, would be for the, on Monday night, the City Council would set their date of public hearing for January 9th on the amended request. So we did renotice all the property owners within 250 feet of the rezoning, and even including anybody that got a notice before got notice again, even though the area has reduced. So we did notify all of the same people again of this hearing. And so basically tonight what you're considering is a proposal to allow expansion of the storage units just on the southerly portion that's cross-hatched on this map. The north 100 feet would be proposed to remain R160. And just so you understand what that 100 feet means, 100 feet is the absolute minimum lot depth under our subdivision ordinance for a single-family lot. These lots are about 124 feet wide, so they're just over 12,000 square feet, theoretically, per lot would be left, zoned R160. Which would allow for a single-family house under R160 zoning standards. The remainder of the property would be for a proposed expansion of storage units. So, sure.
What is a typical front yard setback? I shouldn't say typical. What is a required front yard setback and what is the required rear yard? So how much would be left for a house?
Out of the 100 feet, you have a 30-foot front yard setback as the minimum standard in R160 and a 30-foot rear yard. So it would leave a 40-foot buildable area. That is assuming they apply for no relief from, say, the Board of Adjustment for a setback distance. Where I could see that being an issue might be on a deck, say on an elevated deck on the rear of a property may extend partially into that 30-foot rear yard, and so they may have to request, board relief. At this point, there's no commitment. This applicant is not a home builder. They would still retain ownership of the property, but leaving the north 100 feet would at least allow the potential for future development. There are utility issues in this area currently, or sewer availability that would have to be resolved. So it's not an imminent plan for residential development, but it would not preclude residential development.
Any other questions? Let me go ahead and read this. This is item number 1. It says the City Council initiated request to reconsider a modified request from Arnold DeWitt, and you've already heard what Mike had to say about that particular issue, to rezone property in the vicinity of 1241 East 38th Street. The requested area for rezoning is modified to exclude the north 100 feet of the property south of Mahaska Avenues. Additional subject property is owned by EDSM LLC. Jason, are you presenting on this one?
Yes, Chair, members of the
Thank you,
Commission,
sir.
Jason Van Essen with the city's planning staff. I'll be brief since Mike has kind of filled us in a little bit on the background of this project, this case before you. This is showing the subject property, the applicant's existing facility, the land that he owns to the north, the proposed C2 area. As Mike indicated, we did notice everybody that received a notice prior. This is the response. The cards in a letter are going around. This map here is the map that we had to use to base on whether or not a 6/7 vote is required at City Council, which it is. There's about 28% or so of the area in opposition, so this will require a 6/7 vote at the City Council meeting when it returns. One more graphic here to show you. This is just a updated site sketch showing how they would generally lay this out. This obviously would have to go through our site plan review process, but you got the 100 feet to the north. You have the buildings to the south oriented in the north-south direction, accessed by drives from the existing facility. We are recommending approval of this. We do have some conditions. We felt this is an opportunity that if it's limited by zoning conditions, that this proposal could work in this location. And I'll just go ahead and read through those. Part A, we recommend that the request of rezoning be found not in conformance with the community character plan, and then Part B, that it be amended. And then Part C is the zoning with the conditions. Part A, condition A, is that only basically the use of this area would be limited to uses allowed in the R160 district plus mini warehouse. So even though it would be zoned to C2, it would be a limited C2 that would be limited specifically to the mini warehouse or residential development. B, if the property is developed for use as a mini warehouse self-storage complex, that such development shall comply with the following requirements. Access shall be provided from an internal drive approach from the existing facility to the south and not from East 38th Street. 2, sides of all buildings upon the property facing East 38th Street shall be earth tone colors. 3, no storage units within the westernmost building on the site shall be constructed with the doors facing East 38th Street. No storage units within the easternmost building on the site shall have doors that face the east property line. All exterior lighting fixtures shall be shielded so as not to illuminate onto surrounding residentially zoned properties. Any signage upon the property shall comply with the C1 district regulations. No off-premise advertising signs shall be located upon the property. Any fence along East 38th Street shall be of wrought iron or steel construction painted earth tone or black to complement the buildings with masonry pillars. A minimum 25-foot wide setback shall be maintained along the eastern and western boundaries of the property. The setback area shall be landscaped in accordance with a plan approved by the planning administrator. A minimum 10-foot wide setback shall be maintained along the northern boundary of any development. The setback area shall be landscaped in accordance with a plan approved by the planning administrator. The hours of operation shall be limited to 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. No surface water retention shall be released onto any adjoining residential properties. And just before I turn it over to questions, those setbacks that are referenced as conditions are based on these lines here, not the property line, but an additional setback of 10 feet from this zoning line, and then 25 feet in from these property lines to provide some buffering, screening opportunities. Happy to answer questions that you might have. Mike, you have a comment?
Just 2 additional things. In your at your desk this evening, you had 3 letters that were submitted. I want to point out that the first one was from the chair of the Neighborhood Revitalization Board, and in that the board at their meeting a week ago this past Wednesday, they discussed this proposal, and in this letter they have noted that it's they want to ensure that the Grays Woods Action Plan, neighborhood plan, is being taken into consideration when making a decision on its rezoning request, and that the neighborhood association has been involved in the process. And so they asked that question. I will point out that obviously there have been several public hearings on this, several notices to the neighborhood, several neighborhood meetings held on this over the last 6 to 9 months. I'll also point out that at the NRB's meeting, they did not have the staff report in front of them for the P&Z meeting. And I will point out that on page 3 of the staff report goes into quite extensive detail about the Grayswood neighborhood plan and talks about consistencies and inconsistencies with statements in the plan and this proposal as was discussed previously at your hearing. So in my professional opinion, I believe that the staff did consult that plan and has advised you of what is in that plan accurately in the staff report.
Jason, let me ask you a question. I've got one on the card here. It says it's 12 feet above a manhole at Mahaska, and they're talking about lowering the street. Are you aware of that? I mean, is that...
No, I'm not sure what that comment is related to.
You pass that on. I'm just curious about that issue.
It says East 38th Street is 12 feet above manhole at Mahaska. What happens if street is lowered to where it was expected to be? Will this cause us to have to pay for curbs and storm drains in the future? This project wouldn't relate to any street improvements. So I
And I didn't know how that...
Yeah, I think maybe there's just kind of a mix of concern, but unrelated to this item.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I just need you to refresh my memory. Is this the same situation where we had some zoning grading violations, tree removals and such, the first time it was in front of the commission?
Yeah, Mike, I think you're maybe a
Have
little
those
more up to
been
speed
corrected, or are they
I know
still-
we've been working with them on getting a site plan in and going back through the process and trying to get them, their site and compliance. And I know Mike has been more involved than I have.
The existing site was found to be not in conformance with their existing approved site plan. So regardless of what happens with any rezoning decision this evening, they are obligated to bring their existing development into conformance with their approved plan or get a modified plan approved. They did submit a landscape plan today that's being reviewed that theoretically would address the issues of landscaping on the property. But that has not been finalized yet, and obviously the plantings haven't been planted yet. But once again, regardless, they will be held responsible for compliance with an approved plan, as they would on any expansion area. The grading, I know that they've had several conversations with our engineering staff about the grading. Clearly, the grading occurred. That there's no disputing that. Clearly, there were existing trees that were moved when that grading occurred. They, I believe, as we talked about at the last time this was considered, would be held to our mitigation ordinance based on the aerial photography prior to the grading that occurred. And as far as getting compliance with a grading permit, our engineering department has put at least some of the enforcement on that on hold pending a decision on this zoning, because obviously there would be, if it were approved and if a site plan were approved for the expansion, there would be additional grading that would occur, and they would obviously work with them to get their grading plan approved and the grading of the site in compliance with that plan. It is not a good condition as it is currently, so it is, at least in my recommendation opinion, that it's imperative that there be some resolution on the zoning matter so that we can move forward with either, if the zoning is approved, to get the site in conformance with an approved plan and grading completed, and if it's denied, to get restoration grading occurring and completed on the site.
Okay, I guess my concern is that we may be setting a precedent here, if there is, we're not in compliance and we're saying, okay, we're going to let you do some more, so you come into compliance, are we setting a precedent that other folks don't have to come into compliance? That's a real concern for me.
I would not advocate that this is a precedent or that it would allow someone else to come in and not comply with the code. We enforce on a site-by-site basis, and as I said, regardless of the decision on this zoning, their existing site needs to be brought into conformance with a grading or with their landscaping plan, and there will continue to be enforcement on the grading that occurred on the remainder of the site. So it's just that the engineering department has given some latitude in saying, you know, let's see what happens with the zoning first before we have them go and regrade the site. Or basically, thought is why regrade it 2 or 3 times? Do it once and be done with it.
Christine.
Jason, could you put up the map of that shows the support versus not?
Oh, sure, the response.
The reason I like to see that is because at our previous hearing, I think there was a mail issue somewhere, and possibly not all the cards that came in were accurately reflecting who was in support versus who was not.
This is everybody that was noticed. They received notice the first time, and then we went ahead and followed through with, even though our boundary for 6/7 vote requirements is smaller. So I don't know which one you really want to look at, probably this one.
State code is
State
200
code,
feet.
Yeah, it requires that.
We notice greater than that.
But it's also based off the revised C2 zoning area versus the full.
So that's the old one?
The boundary matches up with the same boundary we noticed the very first time when the applicant was proposing M1 for the whole site. So we wanted to make sure that we kept everybody in the loop that had been that received it prior. But for technical purposes, we also prepared this map so we could advise the council if it required 6/7 vote or not.
With the new thing in front of us tonight, did any of that change?
I could pull the other map out of the file.
The area obviously changed.
Color-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one that I'm aware of that has been clarified is on the left-hand side of the screen is Reeves property. We had a card in support and a card in opposition on the same property.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that the person who was opposed ended up buying out the other entity. So it's now 100% opposition on that.
Previous one, this is the current one.
I had one other question too. And maybe this will be part of the hearing, but what happened with this 120 feet and why are we down to 100 now?
My understanding is staff had met with Councilmember Moore to discuss, what would be a depth for residential. We looked at some lots across the street from this, and in general, 120 feet is a typical lot depth in the area. So that was what was discussed. Subsequent discussions with the applicant, Mr. DeWitt, indicated that additional 20 feet or 120 feet of setback would have cut into their project too much. And so from a cash flow standpoint of a development project, the maximum that they were able to, agree to would be 100 feet. So that was somewhat debated at the council meeting, and that's when it ultimately got referred back to the Planning Commission for consideration. So.
Jackie, did you have something?
Yes, I do. In the letter that Michael read us from the Neighborhood Revitalization Board, he did read the final sentence about whether the neighborhood plan had been considered, but then there was an additional question: has the neighborhood association been consulted? And the third paragraph I noted said that when they previously discussed this during their meeting, that they cite a reference to any amendment approved by the Plan and Zoning Commission and City Council should be based on review and recommendation by the Grayswood Neighborhood Association. So what was the result after their meeting, up to this, up to today's information.
My understanding is that the Grayswoods Neighborhood Associations here this evening, or representatives are, and they are opposed to the rezoning still. So, once again, we provided notice of this. It's been debated at a P&Z hearing, at least on one full occasion, a council hearing, a referral back. There's been quite a bit of discussion about it. I believe that the neighborhood is well aware of what's proposed. There is some disagreement about whether obviously the neighborhood believes it's inconsistent with their neighborhood plan. I think, once again, if the staff recommendation we've outlined on page 3 of the staff report, there are conflicting statements in the neighborhood plan, and the plan says that the neighborhood should be consulted. It doesn't say that the neighborhood has to recommend approval of it. And under our policies, a neighborhood plan, and I believe that the NRB even discussed this at their meeting also, from my discussions with the staff that were there, that they recognize that a neighborhood plan is a policy guide and that it does not supersede the city council's ability to make a legislative decision. They obviously need to take it into consideration and need to weigh that appropriately, but ultimately it does not supersede their right to make a legislative decision. So, and that was discussed by the NRB also.
Any other questions, discussion? Is the applicant here? We'll have them come forward, give their name and address.
Good evening, Honorable Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Wally Peltz with Peltz Engineering Company, representing Arnie DeWitt. Wanted to brief you on this project. I have been involved since the beginning, actually, when I was in my 20s. I am now in my 40s, and we're working on the third phase of this project. A couple of issues that were brought up about being in non-conformance. I know there were some things that were done, changed on the fly. Part of the deal on this back part was Elder Corporation did a grading project, took the sand that's out in the back, stripped it all away without a grading permit. That happened, not under my watch, but we are working towards coming up to a solution that does work. We've looked at some very neat ideas about stormwater conservation. We've been working with the city engineer, and this project evolved starting with the staff, and then saying, specifically with Ross Stafford, Ross said, well, why don't you do a site plan and grade it so we're not doing this again and over and over and over, also addressing the stormwater issues. This is a rough plan showing some of the landscaping. We're proposing at this point doing some more landscaping up front with some boulders. If you've driven past the site, I think it looks very good in the neighborhood. It has that wrought iron fence up front. It has everything involved in it. There are existing evergreen trees along the westerly property line. We did lose one. As I did a visual check, someone took one as a Christmas tree. It's chopped at the bottom, so we're less one than from what our plan. So I am basically here to answer any questions you might have. We're excited to do this plan because we think this will bring all of the nonconformities we'd like to work out with staff. We would like to do this all in one shot. I know we're not going to make everyone happy, but we do think it's an improvement to the whole that would be left if we we can address the grading. That's what we started off with the city. That's when I got involved, is when the violation notice was brought. I went to the city engineer's office and I asked, well, what do we need to do? And that's when we started discussing the solutions, and we thought this was the better alternative to design it, do it, and start building on it. Otherwise, we can, I guess, seed it, grade it, and leave it. So those were just a real quick synopsis of what we've gone through. Besides that, I'm here to answer any questions you might have from an engineering perspective. I know Mr. DeWitt is also in the audience to answer from an owner's perspective.
Mike?
Wally, refresh my memory in terms of grading. I remember at the last hearing, there were some neighbors who were concerned about water runoff and that type of thing. If houses were to be built on those 4 lots, where do they sit in elevation to what's proposed, and where will the water go from the new buildings?
All the water from the new buildings would drain southerly. We're proposing an absorption bed. We've done 6 perk tests that we've turned into the city engineer's office. That will swallow about as much water as we can throw at it. There's a sand vein. I mean, that's why they excavated. The sand is still there. It's ideal for an underground absorption detention basin. The design of it is preliminary so far, but the preliminary calcs show that absorption pipe under the frost line, rock bed, sealed with the fabric. So all of it will drain down because we are now taking, instead of proposing access off of 38th at this location, we're proposing access through our facility. That forces me to drop these things down. The building, I would venture to guess that the roofs of these buildings will be below the East 38th. It's going to be sunken down. It's going to be laid in. And then the lots to the north, we looked at 124 something feet is the average lot width. We've agreed to leave those lots individual with the 100 feet to the north, which leaves a nice wide, I mean, you could do a nice wider building, not so deep, but wider in the R160 instead of splitting it up. I mean, we could leave it at 120 and get more lots out of it, but the grades on that side, East 38th in itself is very close to 9.5–10%. And it's an uncompliant street. It's just a seal coat. I think they put a new asphalt layer over the top of it within the last year or two, upgrading it. But it's not a standard curb and gutter section. So the 120 feet depth-wise wasn't that much of a concern. It's more getting the approaches. You could do some nice tuck unders. I mean, and that's why we're leaving it at the 124-foot width. And all their water would go north. It's about where you see the north end of that is where the break line is on the grade line, if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Wally, I do have some. You indicate you had some solutions. What solutions are we talking about here?
Oh, just solutions to the notice of the grading violation, the notice of...
What are we going to do about the grading at the back of this property? If we're going to leave 100 feet of property there on the back, what are we going to do to grade it to make it appropriate for building houses?
Oh, it's part of our grading plan is to address that whole area. Once it's graded, we do have to do some remediation, as Mike mentioned. We're going to have to plant some trees in that area to recoup what was done. And the grades themselves would work for single family. They don't necessarily work for the storage buildings are flat and they are one level, so it's not conducive. There will be towards the back end here, the homes there would be a ridge, maybe 6 foot high, kind of a natural buffer already between the residential and the storage units. And if you drove Mahaska, you wouldn't even see the storage units. Is the way. I had a 3D visual that we've done, that we prepared for Mr. DeWitt. I think that he showed visuals from East 38th, but coming from Mahaska and on East 38th, they're going to be sunken down. So you'll see those green roofs that are associated with these buildings.
Obviously, we've got some soil loss there. What are we going to do about that?
Most of the soil loss has collected in that, it's about in this area. There's a low depression right here. It comes around. This is a big berm. That's a big knoll that's raised up. It actually comes around, and then it goes into Mr. DeWitt's existing surface water detention basin system. That is our emergency overflow as well. We have not silted into our detention basin. The sand has moved. We've had some four-wheelers out there running up and down on it. We've had different. It's hard to get sand stable. That's why once we grade it, then we can address it and put mats down.
That's obviously why it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a problem because we excavated out of that area, and we got unstable soils in there already. How are we going to fix that? Are we going to terrace it? How are we going to take care of that?
Oh, with our grading plan. When we address it, we'll have the slopes that we've discussed with the city engineer's office. He's looked at our plan preliminarily.
So what is the plan?
Right now is if we get the zoning, we will grade it to make this work.
Okay, you're going to grade that. I'm talking about the 100 feet behind it.
That's going to be addressed as well.
Okay, what are we going to do?
That will be graded and seeded with a hardy, I believe, fescue is what we're specifying. We've talked to a couple of people that know that if you put a thin layer of topsoil on it, a low mow fescue, it's like once a year you chop it down to get it to stabilize, because that's the only way you're going to get it done.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the application? Please come forward.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, Bob Mahaffey, 2220 East 32nd Street, Des Moines. I'm here and speaking in favor of this because I think it can be a win-win situation for our city. I've looked at the Grays Woods plan, and I see in there where they want to maintain the R160. I think by moving this back, we've been able to maintain that R160 on those lots up there. Not only do they exceed the minimum requirement of 7,500 square feet to build on, they're 12,500 feet in that area. Also, their plan calls for a C2 proposed to pursue on East University, and of course that's been accomplished. And I think we need to look at this as an extension of University, as he's not going to change the address, he's not going to change the drives, and that he's going to add to the improvement of that area, because if you looked at it now, it's just wilderness, so to speak. Just a sand and that there, and there's nothing there really to make it add any beauty. But he, in his process of reducing, allowing the 100 feet up there, he's had to reduce the size of his buildings. He's went from 150 to 135 feet, and this reduces his gross revenue of about $25,000 a year. And you can't reduce that much more because of the situation. Any businessman wouldn't go into it if he couldn't cash flow his business. And I know somebody who spoke last time, other facilities around has a lot of open space, but why would a businessman go ahead and build a larger if he would anticipate it's going to be vacant? He's anticipating it's going to have business there. And he has a plan, I think you saw it last time, is the area before that he built his buildings on it and what it looked like. They were just weeds and that, and no one had taken care of it. But his facilities there is nice, attractive, and that he's been a good community person. And I think that in addition to the meeting the requirements for the Grays Woods plan on both R160 and C2, that we're going to be able to increase our tax base for our city. So we've got three pluses there, I think, and I think that with his changes that he's made, he's accommodating the Grays Woods plan, and I'd be glad to answer any questions if you had any for me.
Any questions? Thank you, Bob. Anyone else here to speak in favor of the application? If we have anybody else, we're going to ask you to line up on the wall so we can kind of move through here.
Reverend Jeff Landers, my wife and I, we own the property just west of the proposed C2. As the property stands right now, it's an eyesore. So we're for it, for if no other reason, the beautification of it. But also the DeWitts are business people. They want to expand their business. We're not against that. And it would also stop the criminal element from dumping things like purses that have been stolen in that property. My kids have brought several purses. Some we were able to return because we found credit cards and IDs. Some we were not. Now, had this property been developed, that wouldn't allow them to do that. And it's a place where my kids play. We don't encourage it, but we appreciate when they find things and return it to us. And by us being the Christian people that we are, we have made a lot of people happy by returning their things. And the proposal will eliminate that. And like I say, beautify the process as well. So we're all for it. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, address. What's your address, sir? I'm sorry.
1224 East 38th Street.
Good evening. My name's Arnie DeWitt. I am the applicant, and I just want to take a few minutes just again to review the project that we talked about earlier and to answer any of your questions that you might have. This is what the property looks like today as you drive down East University on East 38th Street. And if you notice the brick fronts and the stone on the fronts of the building, with the new proposal, that's what we'll also have, and we'll be carrying that out through. All of these here across the front will be the same as we have proposed here on it. And this right here is a house that's right across the street that was built, I think, 4 years ago. And the lot size, that's what I'm really basing off, the 100 feet size, is off that house that's built, and this is the diagram of the house. It's 28 feet deep. The deck on the back of it could only be 12 foot. It's a little bit longer on the back. But this house here will fit on that property. It's 1,080 square feet. It retails for around $140,000, and that's in keeping with what the houses in our area are. And so that was some of the criteria that I used for the lots, so that would be big enough to develop the houses that would probably work well in that area. And for, again, when Bob mentioned that, of course, we're in business, we want to develop the property and make a contribution to the community, but we also have to have a return on our investments. And my buildings typically are 150 feet. This building will remain 150 feet because I can move it forward because of our drive here. But the rest of the buildings here, I've had to reduce. This building here now is 135 feet based on the 100-foot lot. If I have to go another 20 feet, I've got to reduce this building another 20 feet. And so it's just too much of a capacity that I give up. And Bob had mentioned 25,000 or something. Well, that's what I'm giving up now by losing the 100 back to the 135 feet. It would be quite a bit more per year if I have to lose the other 20 feet. So for us, and to make the project work, the risk reward, we need to keep the site in this configuration. I've made the buildings a little wider. We can reconfigure the internal sizes so that we can generate the same cash flow. And so this is the reason and criteria behind that. We want to satisfy the Graves Woods Neighborhood Association with the lots back here. And I also have, you may have in your packet, a letter from a couple of people. I had them do an assessment on the property back there to see what the marketability would be. And they said the marketability would be very low, and the likelihood of anybody building on that particular site would be small. I also agree with that. I don't think that they're that buildable. I don't think they're that desirable. But we would be willing to allow the Graves Woods neighborhood have that R1 area there for them, and hopefully someday there will be some houses built on that, especially if they get the sewer through there. And we, of course, would be in support of that. So for me, we think it's a win-win situation for the community, for Graves Woods Neighborhood Association, and for my wife and I. I want to also thank Skip Moore because he was the one who instigated. We had a meeting with Marty Mock, Karen Schupman, and some other business leaders to see if we could find some common ground. And After that meeting, Marty and Karen said they'd get together and discuss it and see if they could come up with a plan that would work. And Skip Moore instigated that, and they came back with the lots across there, but they had to be 120 feet. And I didn't realize that it was a mandatory 120 feet. I just thought that that's what they want, and they used that line because it matched up with a lot that was over to the west there. And then when I was told of the plan, I went back and talked to Mike, and we sat down. I wanted to get all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed. I wanted to make sure, because I've re-engineered this now 3 different times. And so I wanted to make sure that this would work, that we had the setbacks, and all of the things would be put together. We did that, and came up with 100 feet, and we would be willing, more than willing, to develop our ground, meet all the criteria, take care of the whatever we're in violation of, I can't remember the term of the grading permit, and also we were in noncompliance supposedly in the front of the property, and we worked with Sue Ann and her staff, and I think they're pretty confident that we intend to fully comply with all that they direct us to do. So does anyone have any questions?
Ted?
Mr. DeWitt, are you comfortable with the staff recommendation?
I am.
Okay. So no issues with anything in that?
None. No. We agreed to all those staff recommendations. Absolutely. We're in agreement.
CJ?
I just want to be real clear on this. You said you met with Marty and Skip, and you'd all agreed, and the association, and they made a proposal, and you had agreed to that?
No. We'd met with the neighborhood association. Well, we had a meeting over at Plazo's Coffee House, and it was some of the community people, business people, myself and my wife, Karen Schupman, and Marty Mock. And then we tried to come and find some common ground, because there had been quite a bit of discussion within the community, and there's 2 sides that are, going against it, and it really is upsetting the community, and we had no idea that it would come to this.
Well, excuse me, but I guess my question, to kind of shorten this, is that at that time, you had agreed to 120 feet, and now you're back with 100 feet?
No, I never agreed to 120.
You never agreed to
At that time of the meeting, we were just I was saying to the Grayswoods Neighborhood Association that let's try to find some common ground. Let's try to find something that maybe you want from me that I could give to you so that I could make this project work. They went back, then they left. We stopped the meeting. They went back and they discussed it among themselves. And Skip, as far as I know, he was the one that really instigated, and I wanted to thank him for that, especially because he instigated getting that proposal of using the back lots to remain R160. And then when Skip brought that plan back to me with Bob Mahaffey in his office over at Anderson Erickson Dairy, we sat down, we talked about it, and then he had this line drawn, and it wasn't clear to me that it had to be mandatory 120 feet, but evidently it had to be. Well, when I said I would look at it, I would take it back to my engineer, but the first thing I did is I went down and I talked to Mike Ludwig, and I wanted to see what the possibilities would be for that site. We came with, I said, well, I can do 100 feet, and we can make that work. And again, it was based off of, you can use that for housing, and that's the kind of houses typically that are being built there today, or like at least 4 years ago.
So their suggestion was 120 feet, but you're saying you couldn't agree to that, so you're asking for 100 feet?
Yes,
I just want to be real clear on that.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, when they came back to me and said, this is what the Grayswoods Neighborhood Association has come up with, and the parties who were in opposition, that are in the red, would agree to, and we had this line that was 120 feet. Now, at that time, I didn't realize, or it wasn't communicated to me, at least enough, to know that it had to be 120. And so we were just trying to find something that would work, but now it's no. I went back to Skip after I had it worked out, and he said, oh, no, it has to be 120. Well, I can't do 120.
Okay,
So, I reason that I can't is because I don't want to risk. I have it's just my wife and I. I don't want to risk this development by not having enough ability to produce enough income to
service the debt.
Okay, I have another question then. The expansion portion is owned by a separate entity than the established portion? Is that correct?
It's me.
It's you, but it is a separate entity.
It is.
Okay, when or if you sell these, do you intend to sell them together or independently? I guess.
Well,
in the
I don't
future.
know.
Because there's a private drive going through there, and I'm wondering if that would.
Well, I would, most likely, I doubt that I could sell it separately because there's no access.
Right.
So, right now, I own the property up there. We haven't determined whether or not we're going to operate it as EDSM, doing business as East University Self-Storage, or we may bring it all into East University Self-Storage. We haven't decided that yet. But my wife and I own all the property. There's no mortgage or lien on the real estate. There is on the existing business. There's a mortgage on that.
So just in the future, I'm just wondering if we're going to have some issues with splitting it or selling it.
Well, I don't think you'll have any issues with it. It would be me who would have those issues. If I couldn't market the property because it was split, that would be my problem. But I don't think there's going to be an issue as far as developing it, whether or not it's separate.
Any other questions? You have a question? Okay. Let me ask you something. I'm looking at this, and the neighborhood association is saying 120 feet. You're saying 100 feet. There's a potential compromise at 110.
Now, I mentioned to Skip that I could probably squeeze another 5 feet out of it, and I would have to reconfigure my buildings a little bit. And I would probably be willing to do that, but I can't go 120 feet. I can't go 110 feet. I can squeeze, we'd have to reconfigure it a little bit. And I have some more frontage that I could, or on this line right here.
So how much can you do?
I can squeeze another 5 feet. I know it doesn't sound like much, but I have setbacks.
I'm just asking.
I know. I have setbacks and I have drives. I have to maintain these drives through here in order to access the buildings in a convenient way. And so it's just we've looked it over. We've did all the numbers, and I can go with this. And again, I could squeeze another 5 foot out. I told that to Skip. I talked to Skip more about that. But so.
Good.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I'm not sure it's for you.
Oh, okay.
5 feet, 20 feet.
Just ask.
I don't understand. Does 5 feet do something for the neighborhood, or
Ted, I don't know this. Okay. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of the application? Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward. I'm going to ask you to line up on the wall over here so we can kind of move forward. Please state your name and address.
My name is Karen Schupman. I live at 3804 Indianapolis Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm chair of the Grays Woods Neighborhood Association. The Grays Woods Board of Directors have not consulted with the city staff regarding the recent request to rezone the property at 3917 Mahaska Avenue. The Des Moines city staff have not asked for our recommendation nor shown us the recent plan. This is the first time I've seen this tonight. In April 1998, the city staff sat down with Grace Woods neighborhood and to develop our neighborhood plan. The plan specifically calls for development of businesses along East University. The neighborhood plan does not call for expansion of business onto Mahaska Avenue. The Des Moines city staff helped develop our plan. Then our plan went before the Neighborhood Revitalization Board, Plan and Zoning, as you know, the Des Moines City Council, and the Polk County Board of Supervisors, all of whom approved our plan. The self-storage development began in 1998. Plans to expand the business along Mahaska Avenue began approximately in 2004. City staff did not seek the recommendation of the Grays Woods Neighborhood Association at that time. In fact, Grays Woods did not find out about the expansion plans on Mahaska Avenue until June of this year, 2011. To conclude, Grays Woods Neighborhood Association opposes the request to rezone property located at 3917 Mahaska Avenue. Thank you.
Wait just a second.
Any questions?
Any questions? Greg?
Since this new proposal doesn't have, it has R160 along Mahaska, are you still opposed?
We're still opposed.
Would 120 feet make a difference?
That's what, with hesitation, we accepted that proposal, and so did the other neighbors who are opposed within the neighborhood. It was with reservation, but we thought 120 feet is appropriate because it fits better into our neighborhood of larger lots, homes built on larger lots in the neighborhood.
May I ask, what are the lot widths? Do we, or maybe this is for staff, this applicant's proposing 120-foot wide lots. How wide are the other lots in the area?
They vary in the neighborhood. I don't have the aerial photo. The R160 district requires a minimum 60 feet of lot width.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other?
Chairman, one question. I'm not sure if it's for Karen, but it was mentioned earlier that the Grays Woods plan was policy and not, it does not supersede the legislation of the City Council, correct? It's just their thoughts, strong thoughts. Right.
Let me ask you something. Is 105 going to be enough?
It's not very much.
I understand. I'm just asking the question. Is 105 enough? Is 110 enough? We know 120 is enough.
120 is what we really agreed with reservation. So 120 it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please give us your name and address.
Hi, Linda Adamson. I live at 1330 East 41st Street, Des Moines, Iowa. I was the plan chair for the action plan. I am a current board member, and I also spent quite a few years in all these other committees with the city developing this. I am in opposition of anything less than 120 foot. I think the residential belongs on Mahaska. I think the commercial belongs on East University is why. I'm not opposed to him having his new business there. I see the tax base, but I just can't see giving away that residential street to him. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you.
Marlon Mormon, 3320 Kinsey. I'm Vice President of Northeast Neighbors Incorporated, board member of Grays Woods. I live in Grays Woods. I think there's one thing that we fail to see when we look at this map, and the engineer mentioned that East 38th Street has a steep grade. If you start at University and go up East 38th to the top of the hill where that 100-foot line is, you have about a 33-foot elevation. In order to accomplish the building of these units, there has to be a massive excavation of sand. You're going to dig a great big hole. And so as you go up East 38th Street, on the west side, you're going to see 3 new houses. On the east side, you're going to see the tops of storage units, the tops of metal buildings. It's not in character with an R160 neighborhood. When Mr. DeWitt bought this property, it was R160. It's R160 today. Everybody else around has built on R160. Infill housing in this area has doubled over the last 20 years, primarily because of the hard work and efforts of neighborhood leaders who would really clean the area up. It was a crappy area 20 years ago. And now what are we going to do? We're going to dig a great big hole, put a bunch of tin buildings on it so we can look down on the tops of those buildings. And what are you going to do? I mean, you can't undo that. Once that hole is dug, it's done. It's there forever. We live there. This is our property values. I mean, storage units belong next to big box stores, next to interstates, next to busy streets. They don't belong encroaching into R160. And that's all I have to say.
Any questions? I have a question.
120 is our limit.
120 feet. All right. And you're saying it won't make any difference with 120 feet. Is that what I'm hearing?
You have to look at the dynamics of this. We went to everybody.
I understand the dynamics. I live over there. But what I'm saying
120 is it because we had to get a large group of people to agree to this. And we went from house to house to person to get everybody on board to agree to it. And 120 feet was like pulling teeth. So when you knock off another 5 feet, 10 feet, it just doesn't cut it. And the other lots in the neighborhood areas are 120 feet deep. So it matches up and it's uniform with the rest of the area.
When we're talking about 120 feet, we're talking about buildable space, right? I mean, that's really what it's for.
Well, that's one of the problems. On the south side of what's the 100 feet that's proposed, you're going to have a 15-foot cliff at least, because you're going to have to excavate that. This is sand. And, you know, how far can you really build back in 100 feet when you have a 15-foot cliff sitting there?
So will 120 feet make any difference?
I believe, well, that's what we feel is appropriate. We agreed to it and we'll stick with it.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nothing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This will be brief. I'm Janice Bowden, and I live at 1250 East 37th Street, just a couple blocks from here. And I'm the vice chair of the Grays Woods Neighborhood Association, and I am in opposition to this plan. I am a constituent, I'd like to stress, too.
Hello, I'm Skip Moore. I live at 3822 East 28th, and it's not very often the legislative body gets to address the advisory body, but here I am. First of all, I'd like to say I've got great respect for Councilman Bob Mahaffey. He was definitely one of the reasons why I ran for the city council. I've known Bob for many, many years. Generally, we agree on everything, but tonight is one of those times that we definitely do not agree on this. First of all, I'd like to touch on one of the letters you received today. When it was presented to me, I had a real concern with it. It's from Linda Westergaard. I called the city attorney, Jeff Lester, told him what basically the content is in this. He did say she's got a financial arrangement with Mr. DeWitt. There is a conflict, but not a conflict where you pull the letter, but he says it lessens the weight of the letter. There's also another issue with this that you need to be aware of. Linda Westergaard was the chair of Northeast Neighbors. She got voted out as chair. It was a real messy issue. She left and started her own neighborhood organization. Grays Woods is one of the many neighborhoods that decided not to go with her. They decided to stay with Northeast Neighbors. She's got a bone to pick with this neighborhood. Jeff agreed that that would lessen the weight of this letter, so I want you to take that into consideration. I want to talk about the compromise I came up with a little bit. You know, they've been here a couple times, and in my mind, I didn't hear any compromise for Mr. DeWitt at all, that it had to be all or none. And honestly, I was awake at about 2 or 3 in the morning one night, and it just dawned on me, well, what can we do to put a buffer at the north end? I went and met with Mr. Ludwig, and everything's correct. We looked at the properties to the west. They're 120 feet this way. He said what would make sense is let's go 120 feet across this way. And I would like to point out while we're discussing these properties, in all the literature that you've received from staff, it says in an area around 1241 East 38th or something. Everything, Mrs. Westergaard's letter, Mr. DeWitt's engineer's drawings, everything indicates this is a property on Mahaska, which it is. It's not on East University. It's not on East 38th. It's on Mahaska. So anyway, after I met with Mr. Ludwig, I proceeded to go to everybody that I knew that was opposed to this plan. And I did that for a reason. I got everybody who was opposed to agree to 120 feet. I didn't want one naysayer when I went to Mr. DeWitt. Didn't want one negative report. Didn't want anybody to be mad. To a T, they all had reservations. But they said because I'd taken the time to do this and I brought it forward, they agreed to it. I asked Bob to set up a meeting with Mr. DeWitt. We met in Bob's office at the dairy, and Arnie took a look at it, and it was the first time I saw him thinking that maybe he could compromise. He did say take it. He was going to go see staff about it, and I kind of took that personally, that like I didn't know what I was talking about. But anyway, the next thing I hear is that Arnie's got a plan for 100 feet. And I met with Arnie, and when he started showing me what he had, I said, wait a minute, this is 100 feet. The one we brought to you was 120. He goes, well, there's many good reasons on this. And I said, you don't understand. My word is my honor. I talked to these people for 120 feet. It's got to be. I'm the one that said it's got to be 120 feet. He said, well, look it. If I go another 20 feet, I lose, he said, about $35,000 a year, which I kind of questioned, because when he came in front of the city council, he said his existing property here earns $40,000 a year there. And if he knocks 15 feet off the proposed buildings, he's going to lose 37. That tells me he's making $370,000 a year off of his new proposal. Also, something that's been brought up is that these are separate properties. If, and there's always the potential, if they get sold separately, that north property is going to have a driveway put on it. There's just no way around it. Now, we all keep talking about the neighborhood plan. You all got to see it last time. I wish you had a copy now, but I'm just going to read a few things out here, and it's going to take a few minutes. First of all, I'd like to point out this document was approved by the NRB, the Planning and Zoning Commission, who we're sitting here with right now, the City Council, and the County Board of Supervisors. And the very first page shows the supervisors and the City Council and everybody approving these kind of plans. Neighborhood planning staff worked with the neighborhood group to develop appropriate goals, and feasible action plan. The success of the revitalization effort depends on a continued coordination of efforts between the neighborhood organization, the city, the county, and the Neighborhood Finance Corporation. This plan was prepared through a joint effort of the City of Des Moines, Neighborhood Planning section of the Community Development Department, and the Grays Woods Neighborhood Association. The final approved plan becomes an amendment to the city's comprehensive plan and becomes an ongoing guide affecting future policy decisions for the area. It's a guide, and we all know that. The neighborhood serves as a gateway to Des Moines' east side and is characterized by a somewhat pastoral setting with sloping wooded hills rising up from the creek, which bisects the neighborhood. Much of the neighborhood is wooded and undeveloped, with even the residentially built areas displaying a mature tree canopy. Now, this lot here that we're considering now used to have a mature tree canopy. It doesn't have that anymore. In recent years, several issues have affected residents of the neighborhood, including more frequent floods, which we all know that we're now addressing, impacting the homes near 4 Mile Creek and its tributaries. The lack of road, storm sewer, and sanitary sewer infrastructure in the Broadacre area, this is in the Broadacre area, has limited its development potential and underserved those who live here. And I will tell you this because of another project in Des Moines where we're putting $4.2 million into a sewer project unassessed. I took the opportunity at the City Council and said it's time we start working on other neighborhoods unassessed. And Bob and I have met with staff over this. They're putting together a neighborhood plan or meeting now. They're going to hopefully be meeting with the neighborhood in January. And we're going to find a way to get the infrastructure in this neighborhood. So when I hear talk about nobody's going to build in here, that's kind of nonsense. The issue is the city has neglected this neighborhood. Anybody that's driven through it will tell you that. And we're going to move ahead on that. And while I'm on the council, we're going to see to it that it's put in. Now I'm going to go into their action plan. starts off with commercial goals.
Skip, I'm going to give you about another minute.
Could I have just, I mean, this is really important.
I understand, but...
Well, anyway, I'll go on to the meat of this then. Issues. Interior businesses in the neighborhood, which this will be. The goal is to restrict expansion of existing commercial development into existing residential development within the neighborhood. Plan of action. How do we accomplish that? Prevent commercial rezoning of residential property adjacent to existing commercial uses. Then under resources, who does this? The Grays Woods neighborhood, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the City Community Development Department. And I'll say this right now. I think staff, I'm one of the biggest supporters on the council of staff, but I think they dropped the ball on this. Mr. DeWitt brought the project to them. They approached, they approved it. Then they said, oh, by the way, you need to meet with the neighborhood. And Arnie called me first. He didn't even know there was a neighborhood plan. Staff hadn't even described it to him. I'm going to wrap this up. This is something that's been touched on a little bit. Implementation of the plan. Future commercial development proposals should be allowed flexibility for amendment of the future land use in cases where they are determined compatible with neighborhood. However, the intent of this plan is not to provide for or encourage large-scale commercial development. At this time, this plan does not strongly advocate for or any increase in commercial development in the neighborhood in order to protect the existing character. And this is the final statement I'm going to read in here. This is the end of their implementation plan. Any amendment approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council should be based on review and recommendation of the Grays Woods Neighborhood Association. And what I'd like to say is, my gut reaction to this is, and I'm hearing this from other neighborhoods in the city, and we've got some neighborhood leaders that have neighborhood plans. We've got a business leader that's got a business plan. And if we turned our backs on your plans, you wouldn't be happy. And what's happened here is we've taken this neighborhood, we've taken them by the hand, we're leading them down the gold brick road, and when we get to the gates of what they think is Emerald City and we open it up, we find Baghdad on the other side. And I think that this neighborhood should be consulted on this and they should be listened to. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Greg?
So, Skip, is 120 feet the number?
I support whatever the neighborhood wants. I ran on that, and everybody knows that. And whatever this neighborhood agrees to, I will support. If they had come around and said, we support this entire project, I would vote for it. Christine Pardee's neighborhood came to us with a project over on Franklin that I said at City Council I was opposed to, but because it was part of their plan and they asked for it, I supported it.
Good.
Yeah, I have a question. Skip, 120 feet changes everything you read?
It doesn't change anything in my mind.
Okay. And the fact that Mr. DeWitt claims he can't make any money on the project, it won't cash flow if he does 120 feet, but he can do it at 100.
It's hard for me to understand when he says his current project, the current buildings he has only earns him $40,000 a year, and yet knocking 15 feet off 150-foot long buildings, he's going to lose $37,000 a year.
Well, I'm not sure it's in our purview to review the accounting, but when the applicant says that 120 feet's a deal breaker and 100 feet's doable, that's a significant change from the last time he was here.
In my mind, if the neighborhood says no, if they say no 100 feet, I say no to 100 feet. It's a deal breaker in my mind.
Okay. And we'll talk later.
Okay.
Christine.
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to make a comment. I wanted to thank you for all the time, energy, and effort that you took to try to negotiate this. Frankly, I was really, really surprised, and it doesn't matter what I think personally, but I was very surprised that this went from 120 to 100, considering the fact that there's been so much opposition to this from the Neighborhood Association and neighbors in the past. I thought it was a great effort, And so I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Jack?
Skip, what are you left with if this is not developed?
You mean the way Arnie wants?
If Mr. DeWitt's project doesn't go forward, there's no rezoning, what are you left with?
Well, one thing that Mike has said earlier that I will guarantee you is that he is in non-compliance. He's been in non-compliance from the fall of '04. There was a cease and desist order issued last year to get him to stop, and I will guarantee you it's going to be brought into compliance.
So
he filed an initial grading plan that he has not followed, and that should be corrected.
So I hear you, and we've talked about that, and Mr. DeWitt and his engineer have talked about that as well. So it's all filled in and it's graded in accordance with the grading plan. What are you left with?
Big vacant lot.
Okay. To what end?
To what end?
Right.
We're going to end up putting in infrastructure in that neighborhood, and believe me, even a ranking city staffer looked at a lot in that neighborhood and he said once he found out there was no infrastructure, he ended up building elsewhere, a real nice area in town. You need to drive through this neighborhood and see it's a gem is what it is, just waiting to be discovered. We have people in there that are running water lines across other people's yards to get to water lines. Some of the streets don't have any gas. They don't have sewers at all. We've got propane on houses, a lot of septic. We need to get sewers put in there, and we need to get hard surface streets in there with the utilities underneath.
So you'd have a big vacant lot ready for residential development in your mind?
Within the character of the neighborhood as it currently is.
And then I was going to ask, I've heard the 100, 105, 120. As you devised the 120 as the setback or size of these lots, was there some engineering basis for that, or did there just happen to be a match line on both sides of
Like I said, I met with Mike and I said, what can we do with this? And he said the most common sense way is let's follow that 120 feet on the west side of East 38th and we'll bring it across. But I want to say again, I've said it before, everybody had reservations for this. And now I think they're a little bit upset with me because if I hadn't done that, there wouldn't have been any compromise and this would have been over at the last city council meeting when Arnie was there.
No, I was just reflecting on the engineering that has been done by Mr. DeWitt and wondered if the neighborhood association or some private citizen had done some work to arrive at that 120 as acceptable, other than what I've heard that
Nope,
you found some match lines.
It's like I said, Mike and I spoke and that's where it came from.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks, Skip.
Thank you.
Marty, give us your name and address.
Okay. Marty Mock, 2701 Arthur Avenue. Again, I need to repeat that I'm here basically to request the Neighborhood Association. Up until recently, I was president of Northeast Neighbors. I now serve as president of Des Moines Neighbors. Both of those organizations, by the way, are very concerned about what's going on here. Northeast Neighbors has voted to totally support the neighborhood in this issue. Des Moines Neighbors, while we've not taken a vote as far as this issue, we have discussed at length the implications of the neighborhood plans and the concern now we have on other neighborhood plans around the city as to what kind of weight they actually carry. It seemed very cavalier when it was said earlier that, it doesn't matter what the neighborhood plan because this council, and by nature the council, you as an advisory board, can supersede those. And then it puts, do the plans have any actual weight to them at all then? And it's only the weight that you guys can put on them and the concern that they have. By way of summary, I think that we need to understand that this property has been out of compliance, and it's not just the grading permits that's been out of compliance. He's been out of compliance in landscaping, he's been out of compliance in grading, he's been out of compliance on the sidewalk, he's been out of compliance in tearing down trees. And we have a large number of out of compliances. And so you can understand the concern that the neighborhood has as if now we have a whole new arrangement built upon compliances that have not been met earlier and have no guarantee of having been met in the future. And to make the question worse, or the issue worse, we are saying that because you're out of compliance, we will give you what you want so you might be in compliance later, and actually rewarding the grading that was already done, not in compliance with the city. And that's a concern. It's a concern in the neighborhood, and it's a concern of why they were very questionable about the 120. But I'm going to tell you, folks, that was a hard one to do, that 120 feet. Skip probably would have been better off if he hadn't done it, because it's taken a lot of heat from trying to work something out where residential can meet commercial. The reality is that, and Skip brought this up, this property is not an extension. The address of this property is on Mahaska. It's not an extension of the university project. And there is a good legal question as to, if you do not put concerns in there, you do not put restrictions on there, that there are actually two properties here. And that there is a common area, a road that's going to be used, and that if that property can be sold at some future date, and it is zoned C2 or C1, C2, that then we have to make allowances based on the actual zoning as what's there. And so you have that concern as well. One of the major problems we have is that at the last city council meeting, the questions came about as whether or not this has met with the neighborhood plan. And ensuingly, has it met with the neighborhood association? This particular plan has not met the neighborhood association. Arnie did not come to them with this new plan. He has not met with the neighborhood association. The city has not met with the neighborhood association. This is a new plan that has not gone through the process of any kind of review. And so you ask, what does the neighborhood want? Well, they never asked what they want in relation to this new plan that comes before you. They have not met with the neighborhood association. Finally, and lastly, I think that we need to take in consideration the fact that the Neighborhood Revitalization Board has great concerns. If you want to know more about that, their chair is sitting in the audience here and wrote a letter to you. Great concerns about the effect of going against neighborhood plan. Northeast Neighbors has, and the neighborhoods that are attached to that have great concern as to whether or not what can be done in neighborhoods without neighborhood approval, without neighborhood actual involvement in the process. This was done the wrong way. And it's done in the wrong situation, and this is not a good mix. Would they compromise at the 120 feet? Very begrudgingly, yes. Nothing more. I guarantee it. They would not compromise on that because they didn't want to have to do the 120 feet, but they did it as a favor to Skip. At that point, they would much rather just simply you vote no, because that's what it belongs. That's what should be done right now, is to vote no. And then if Mr. DeWitt wants to continue actually working with the neighborhood, he can come back in a year with a plan that they have both agreed upon, and we can all maybe agree upon before you as a body. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else to speak in opposition? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry. CJ, did you have something?
I just have a comment. I don't know how many.
Why don't we wait?
Okay.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. Rebuttal. Do you want to do it, or does Mr. DeWitt want to do it?
Is there only one chance?
One chance.
Go ahead.
I'll be short, I'll be brief. The 120 feet that came to Mr. Office, sat down in my office, we went over the 120 feet. I had issues right away with grading, number one. Number two, I was the one who said, well, can we make it 100 feet? And then we were talking about leaving them at 124 foot in width. Because you understand, if we go to 120 foot depth, 60 foot in width is what the ordinance allows. I can get 8 lots in there, but it's not conducive to Mahaska. It's not a compliant street. There's some places that it's way too steep. You're not going to get a 60 foot lot to work. So that's probably my fault. I'll take the blame for that one, because I said, well, wouldn't it just be better thinking a nice wide, 124 foot wide, but 100 feet deep is bigger than 60 by 120, because that's what could happen. And there's lots around it in the neighborhood, that are shown here. There's no consistencies. I mean, you're going to go from something I mean, you can get something that dense by the R160. And that's not what I'm hearing. I was thinking, anyway, I will take the blame for that, changing from that. Mr. DeWitt has agreed, I just spoke to him, that 124-foot width, we'll leave it at 4 lots, 105 feet deep, pushing it to our critical limits. And then they were also talking about the compliance with the neighborhood. Self-storage is not loud. It doesn't bring a criminal element. It doesn't bring, if you can think of a better transition to, we all know how multifamily works really well between single family, multifamily, commercial. This is quiet. It's simple. It operates during daylight hours. And I understand their concerns. I think it's a beautiful neighborhood as well that has lots of potential. But there are some engineering issues, namely Mahaska. If you put curb and gutter on it, you're not going to put a sidewalk in it because it won't be ADA compatible. It's too steep. It just won't work. So either we're going to shave down this mountain, cut down all the trees. I mean, there's give and take on both sides of this. So on that grading permit, we were issued. This is when I got involved, April 2nd of 2010 this year. We were given a notice of our 2004 plan not being in compliance. And that's when this process began. That's when I got involved, and we've been working through this. Not to say I haven't been involved. I mean, we did the very first phase back in '99. And then this, the grading plan of 04, which is not mine, by the way, so I won't take that. But that was supposedly going to be done and all graded, but it's not. So now we get this notice of violation. The tree clearing that took place obviously also was prior to the tree mitigation. But Mr. DeWitt has agreed to put those back in. So I'm really hoping we can get this thing done, get this project off my desk. And I thank you for your time and everyone's patience. And there really has been a lot of hard work, and especially with staff.
Mike.
Wally, could you put the site plan back up?
Sure.
Is it possible to slide the buildings and the paving 20 feet south and give 120-foot lots?
Keep detention? No. Because what happens is that this is where my detention buffer is, and that strip where I need that space to absorb the water. If I slide this thing 20 feet south, the other critical case that was talked about money, well, they talk about 20 feet, well, it's cost benefit. I still have to create a fire route because we're still one access only. So on the north, as we shrink this down to 20, my cost per unit, because my paving dimensions really don't change that much. I'm still paving a huge slab on the north.
I'm talking about sliding the whole thing down. How many feet of green space do you have there now for detention?
I have about 32 feet.
That measures only 32 feet.
Yes, that's all I have. And I'm just scraping by getting enough detention to make this thing work. I mean, it's a big jigsaw puzzle trying to make this thing work. I mean, and it'll, like the other option is, when we went to see Ross, who sent us the letter, I can make it in compliance, put 3-to-1 slopes everywhere, put the seat on it, and we can be done. But just me personally, I think it's an improvement. I like what it did to the corner. It looks pretty. The brick, the stone, nobody else has a fence like that along University. I drive that every morning. It's kind of like, I'm really hoping someone will do a corridor like they did on Fleur of all the flowers. I mean, that's a beautiful gateway. And I heard somewhere that's in the plans. But anyway, I'm rambling.
Wally, I have another question. Not that I'm trying to micromanage this design, but I'd like to find a way to make it work too.
Okay.
From a practical perspective, multiple aisleways and short buildings are inefficient. Can you turn the buildings and run them the other direction and have long buildings and get the density that he needs in square footage?
When I start doing that, I jump into sprinklering my buildings. If we turn the other way, we play with the jigsaw puzzle that way. And as soon as you exceed a certain limit, then I'm into bringing in a bigger fire main. I'm also bringing in sprinklers into every building because then I'm violating certain codes.
Also, it would be in violation of we have can't have any doors that face east and
Oh, correct. All the doors have to be east-west facing.
Okay.
Any other questions? Wally, I have one.
Okay.
You ever met with the neighborhood since you've had this plan?
I have not. I've received reports from Mr. DeWitt because he has gone to them.
Has Mr. DeWitt met with the neighbors since this plan's come to be? 100 feet.
This 100-foot one, I do not believe he's met with the full group.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, as a point of clarification, I will point out the council did refer this back to the Planning Commission. The plan was presented at the city council meeting when it was referred back to the commission. We did mail notices, and I apologize if staff did not contact the neighborhood and specifically run the plan by them.
No.
We did not receive contact from the neighborhood asking to see the plan either.
And I'm not asking for that. I'm just simply saying when you look at the neighborhood plan, it says they'll meet with the neighborhood, and that hasn't happened.
Well, originally it did.
How long ago? But it hasn't happened since the proposal came out, right?
With the new, yeah.
All right, that's all.
You're correct.
I have a question for Michael. From a practical perspective, does it matter how we vote? Is a supermajority not required of council?
Yep, it's regardless, yeah.
I think it always matters how you vote. But yes, 6/7 vote is required due to the percentage of opposition.
Somebody's going to have to make a motion, but I'll just tell you what my opinion is.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Mike, go ahead.
Well, I'll wait for somebody to make a motion.
Well, before we get into that, I'm just wondering if Mr. DeWitt wants to continue this, give him some time to meet with the neighborhood. I mean, that's what the plan says, is that he meets with the neighborhood. That hasn't happened. Does he want to take that opportunity to meet with the neighborhood? Mr. DeWitt?
He said yes.
I would be very happy to meet with the neighborhood.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that the neighborhood will see that, that we have an interest in trying to meet and come to some common ground. We'd surely like to develop this property. We purchased the property. We own it outright. We've got a lot of money invested. We surely don't want that to go away.
When is your next neighborhood meeting? Is it possible to move that meeting up? Okay. When might that be able to occur? I'm not pinning you down right now. I'm just kind of getting. No. I'm just trying to figure it out for if we're going to.
So, are you reopening here?
I'm not reopening a hearing. I'm just asking for some information so that we can kind of make a decision here.
Because I think the neighborhood needs some clarity is what you're asking them to do again.
What we're asking is, you've indicated that they never met with the neighborhood. He's agreed to that he's never met with the neighborhood. All I'm trying to do is figure out if we can get him to meet with the neighborhood. I don't know what that will do, Marty, frankly, but
It seems to be an impasse and compromises here. That's the reason why I'm asking whether we're just wasting time.
I don't know that.
Personally, I think we should vote. The neighborhood has said they want 120 feet. I think we need to decide how we feel about it.
It's up to you guys whether you want to continue it. I mean, I'm just asking them as to whether or not that's some sort of compromise that we could get things resolved.
May I make a comment?
Go ahead, Shirley.
Yeah, I don't. This is difficult. I think the last time that the folks came before us, I raised the question to Karen about because it puzzled me that Mr. DeWitt had purchased this property back in like 2004. Some of this business had progressed. And I asked her at that time, when the plan was presented from the neighborhood, if Mr. DeWitt was ever given a copy of the plan. And I guess my concern is communication. We haven't had it, and I think that's really the really sad part of the whole issue here. I think we have a person who is trying to develop a business and do some things, and the communication has not been there between the neighborhood association and the person. And I'm a strong advocate of neighborhood associations and meetings and all of those kinds of things, and it works very well for a win-win situation. But when you go for 7 years and there hasn't been any communication there, I just kind of take issue with that. And I appreciate the fact that, Mr. Mahaffey, Mr. Moore has been there to assist and to try to bring this about. But I guess I don't have any real solution to it, because it sounds to me like we're just at opposite ends here, and I'm just kind of puzzled by it. And I watched the whole city council meeting where you guys were there, and I watched all of that, and I knew it was coming back to us. And I just wanted to say that I think it's unfortunate.
Tim?
I'd like to segue on her comments. Sure, Mr. DeWitt runs a great business and has a great reputation for what he does on the east side. I think this is probably his livelihood, if not perhaps his nest egg for retirement. So I got to take that into consideration. There's a lot of weight to what's going on here. Throughout the hearing, it sounded like you've been doing all you can do to appease the neighborhood association. However, when we hear Councilman Moore brokered a deal at 120 feet and that's been reneged on, I look at the fact that I'm a neighborhood association president, and if I don't have the people behind me when we make decisions, we're only as strong as our neighborhood association. And the reason I got to think that the neighborhood association will make the right decisions for their neighborhood. So at this, I think if he said 120, it needs to be 120 if that's what the neighbors want.
Christine?
I just want to echo that too, as being the president of the Waveland Park Neighborhood Association. One thing I find disturbing is, and I think is really important, is that process. I can't imagine as a neighborhood association president, if we had a business that was trying to do something and we didn't go through that process, where the business was meeting with us and and we're communicating. It's just, I think the process is important, and it's very clear here that there is a new plan, and it didn't go through its process. So I would reiterate too what Tim said.
CJ?
I would like to comment also. These neighborhoods put a lot of time and energy into these plans. I know that I served on the committee as chair of the plan in my neighborhood, and when we were approached on this, it was like, oh, this is going to be quick, it's Waterbury, it's 3 months. No. We were 9 months working out this plan with 15 people in the neighborhood. So I think we need to take these plans seriously. We really believed that the city and all of these boards were behind us. We took it seriously, and I think the commission and the council need to take these neighborhoods plans seriously. I mean, if someone is in a neighborhood and is not aware of the plan or that they have an association, I just can't believe that, because I'm new to the city too, and I knew immediately that my neighborhood had a neighborhood association, and that's been 20 years ago. So I just think we have to support these neighborhoods, and I certainly wouldn't want an encroachment on a city street. This is a city street. Mahaska is a residential street. This is not University. So I would be in favor of a motion to bring this to a vote and not postpone it further.
Do you have a motion, CJ?
Sure. make a motion that the commission deny, what do I want to say? Deny the plan.
Recommendation. Deny the recommendation.
Deny the recommendation.
Any other discussion?
I'm not going to support the motion because I just don't want to give up on this. I think that the developer has offered to place a portion of the ground into residential. When the neighbors came the last time, they listed several concerns. One was that I recall that stand out in my mind, the illegal grading, the fact that the landscaping plan was never installed according to the original plan. There was a concern about water runoff, and the biggest concern was, and again, this is from my perspective, that they were losing residential lots. So this developer, thanks to Skip, has proposed 4 residential lots. In my opinion, as an architect, these lots are more than large enough to build a house on. My house is 2,100 square feet. It's 22 feet deep. This has 40 feet of depth. My angst here is that, in good faith, the neighborhood negotiated, in their mind, 120 feet. The developer is saying, I can live not with 120, but with 105. Surely there's a way to make this work. I'd hate to kill this over 15 feet. I don't want to defer this. I had just said I'd rather vote on it, but if there's any hope in a deferment that they can go back and try to massage this plan and work it out, I'm for deferring it if they can hang on. Otherwise, the developer is telling us this project is dead if it's 120 foot depth.
So are you making a motion to continue? But continuance would take precedent over the actual motion itself.
I think that's the only hope to see both sides win. And maybe nothing will come of it, but if we vote to deny staff, it's dead.
So you're asking to continue it, moving to continue it.
Well, I can't make a motion because there's already a motion.
No. The motion for continuance takes priority over the main motion. Roberts, pull out your Roberts.
I'd like to hear from everybody else first.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ted.
I'd like to thank Councilman Moore and Councilman Mahaffey as well. Obviously, there has been a lot of work put into this. I was frankly getting at, is 120 and 100, are those both sort of arbitrary numbers? And it sounds like there was a process around the 120, and there's also a process around the 100. 100 is what works to cash flow the project. And I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Simonson that we ought not kill this over 20 feet. I think, honestly, listening, spending 3-4 years on this commission, I think there's a lot of ruffled feathers over 20 feet, and I'm not sure that there's a whole, there is a process. I understand that now. There has been a process arriving at these numbers, but I'm not sure that 20 feet is important to everything else that's going on here. So I think, but it's your neighborhood association and it's your business, and if there's a way to agree on it by continuing it, then I would certainly support a continuance. And I would like to hear everybody else speak as well, but I'd be willing to make a motion for continuance.
Well, I'm just going to go.
Okay.
Tim.
A continuance, or unless Mr. DeWitt would say we'll go with 120.
Shirley.
I would hope that something could be worked out between the neighborhood and Mr. DeWitt.
Joel.
I'm in favor of continuance too, to see if we can work it out.
Christine.
I'd be in favor of continuance, but I don't know if that's really going to result in getting to any different point than where we're at now. And, I'm seeing head shaking. I don't want to interpret that, but, if it's not going to result in us being forward, we just wasted a bunch of time. And so I've got mixed feelings on that. I don't understand. I mean, I don't know the math on this. I don't understand how Mr. DeWitt cannot make a profit if it's less. But
Jackie.
I understand totally what Commissioner Party is saying. I do understand the math of counting votes, and I think perhaps doing a continuance might be in the best interest of all tonight.
Joanne.
I think I'm for continuance also, mainly because it will give them a chance to actually force the issue. Either you make up some compromise or whatever, and that's it. So I think giving them some time to actually talk to each other and decide what can be done, because I think the topography and the sand in the area is just not buildable to start with. So I don't know about residential, but still, I think we need to continue it and let them discuss these fine points.
Jack.
Well, I'm a trial lawyer, and I spend a lot of time assessing the readiness of things to go to trial, and have asked for my fair share of continuances over time. I also spend a lot of time in mediation of those disputes, and I've been at 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon when people were miles apart, and been amazed that we've been able to resolve cases. I see a little too much pride involved in what's happening here, and maybe a little negotiation would be helpful. And in that sense, I think that it would be good to postpone this issue. You may end up doing our job for us, and there may end up being no result, no resolution, no mediation. But that's fine.
CJ.
I'll stand by the neighborhood. I think we have an integrity issue here also of noncompliance. And this neighborhood has put a lot of time and energy into this. This is their neighborhood. They live there, and I have to stand behind them.
Mike.
I've already spoken relative to the continuance, but I will make a comment since we have two city council members here relative to current noncompliance. I feel for staff because I don't think we have enough staff. And we approve plans, and yet there is no one available to go out and count trees and shrubs. We have, on occasion, required of the approval of projects that the engineer of record, prior to the issuance of a permanent certificate of occupancy, certify that the site plan has been built in compliance with the approved plan. And we put the burden on the license of that individual to go out, count every tree and shrub. I used to own a building in Clive. One of the trees in the back of the property died. The property manager cut it down. I received a letter within 30 days from the city of Clive saying you removed a tree. And I can tell you the suburbs go out and they count every tree and shrub. They look at the species, they look at the size, because they want to make sure that the developers are building the site according to the approved plans. We don't have staff to do that. So somehow we need to figure out this should not have been in noncompliance. So let's work on ways to catch these at the beginning and not 6 or 7 years later.
Greg.
I really don't like the fact that we're dilly-dallying over 15 feet. I mean, I think it's silly. And Skip admitted that the 120 feet was somewhat arbitrary, and if these existing lots were narrow 60, 70-foot lots, I would want to stick with a normal 120-foot depth. But from a planning point of view, if it's okay to violate that residential zone with this commercial zone, and so all we're discussing is that 15 or 20 feet or whatever it is, I think it's far better, since Mahaska has a great issue, that they be wide lots, and so there be some fuss allowed to get potential housing in there than sticking to the 120 feet. But that's just my opinion. if that's what it takes to get it done, that it be arbitrarily 120 feet because that's what it is, it's arbitrary, so be it. But I would like to see the lots be left wide, and I'm somewhat afraid that it'll be replatted and be narrower lots if it goes to 120 feet. And I think that's worse personally, but I think that we should allow him to do that if we force him into that 120-foot depth. So that's just my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, one more.
Ted, I'm waiting for a motion from you.
Thanks. I'll do that in a moment. Since there are two council people here, it seems to me that council wanted something done. They wanted a decision. But they punted to us and wanted us to make it for them again. And it's perfectly okay, perfectly appropriate, but I don't think we're going to get a good decision out of this unless we continue this. So I with that, we'll move a continuance.
Okay, prior to doing that, I want to, since I'm the chairman, I get to speak last, huh? I'll be real honest with you why I'm looking for a continuance. I know that the work, because I've talked to them, I know the work that the councilmen have put into it. A lot. I mean, we put a lot of work here, but they put a lot of work into one issue. And I take my hat off to them for all the slavery that they've done to try and get this compromise. And I'm just simply saying, I don't see why, if there's the least opportunity to compromise that, why we don't do it. If we can get, here's the thing, these people are going to live there even after this is decided. If they're living there and they hate each other, it's not going to be any better no matter how we decide. It already is a 6/7 vote, so no matter how we decide, it doesn't make any difference for those in the neighborhood to understand that. It's already 6/7 whether we vote in favor or against it. And so Mr. DeWitt, I hope he understands that too. What I'm suggesting is if we can get it back to the neighbors, realizing, again, I'm putting it back on the councilman's shoulders. I apologize, Skip and Bob, but if we can get it back to neighbors and we can get a compromise and resolution out of this, we're worlds ahead of the game. So, Mike, did you have something?
Yeah, if you would indulge and possibly ask the applicant if they'd be willing to a continuance.
They already said yes.
The January 9th date is just what is on the draft roll call for council on Monday night. If we need to move that to a later hearing date, we can have the roll call change tomorrow. I guess we need to know from the applicant and the neighborhood what timeline in January could be met. Could this come back the second meeting of January to the P&Z? Could you meet before then?
19th.
Second meeting of January for the Plan Commission would be the 19th. Would it be possible for the neighborhood and the applicant to meet before January 19th?
I'm sorry, Mike, that won't be possible for me. We've already scheduled a vacation. We'll be out in the country, and I can't change that. So I can go. You can do it earlier or later.
No, they do it. They can do it in February.
Jason, what's the first meeting of February?
The first meeting in February would be February 2nd.
Let's do February 2nd.
Will you be back?
That's
3rd of February. So let's shoot for how about February 16th?
All right.
That
makes it better for the neighborhood anyway because they were talking about a March date. That's your motion, right, Ted?
That's my motion.
Okay. February 16th. You got that, Kathy? Okay. All those in favor of continuing this matter to February 16th? Motion's by Ted. Raise your right hand. Opposed?
So the only thing I would note is that February 10th, we would be mailing out a new staff recommendation to the commission for the 16th meeting. So if you're back on the 3rd, and if possible, could the neighborhood and the applicant meet the week somewhere between the 3rd and the, say, 9th? Would that be? I'm sorry, what?
I did too.
The meeting's the 16th. If you can have a meeting before the 10th of February, that'd be great. And if the two parties could go outside and agree on a date, that'd be great. Appreciate it.
Okay. Joel's out of here. I'm going to be out of here too. By the way, that's continued. I'm sorry. Didn't make it.
We have a changing of the hats.
Uh-huh. We still have one more item.
Yes, I am. Can everyone move along so we can move to our last item, please?
The engineer's name? Wally Pelt. What's his last? P-E-L-D-S. Pelt. Okay.
Where are we? Where is this? We're ready for item 6, which is a request from Neighborhood Development Corporation represented by Heidi Wessels for items related to development of 1938 Southwest 6th. Jason.
Chair, members of the Commission, Jason Van Ness and the city's planning staff. This was before you a month or so ago for, I guess maybe it's been a couple months, for a rezoning to NPC. So this is a follow-up to a project that you've seen before. This is their site plan. NPC requires site plan review by the Commission. Subject property, Southeast 6, Hartford Avenue, Columbus Avenue. Kind of looking back at the property towards the south and the east, along the north perimeter. The eastern edge.
Jason, it's not focused.
Man. There we go. Looking to the north along the eastern edge. Looking down the south perimeter of the site towards the west. Response map, we didn't, we know notices, but we didn't do any response. So here is the proposed site plan, pretty much like the site sketch you saw at the rezoning stage. One aspect of tonight's agenda is not just the site plan, but also some vacation or right-of-way. Their current property line actually runs pretty much, if you just take this and go straight, so there's a triangle here that they would like to vacate and purchase and assemble as part of their site. Got the building, parking to the west, trash enclosure in the parking lot. I'll just go ahead and skip to the staff rec. As I mentioned, at the beginning of the meeting, there was questions about maybe moving this to consent. There is one item of disagreement between the applicant and staff. We are recommending approval of both the vacation, subject to reservations of easements for any utilities that might be in place. And then Part B, the site plan, we're recommending approval subject to compliance with any comments from our Permit and Development Center. The removal of these 3 trees, we're going to be in beds. They're only a couple feet wide to allow for adequate pedestrian movement, which we believe is there's not a space there to really support trees. So we're suggesting these just be planter beds for grass or flowers. Number 3 is that the sidewalk over in this area be 6 foot wide, and this is where there's a difference in agreement or opinion. Yeah, it's difference in opinion. Currently there are 4 foot wide walks and some approaches. The approaches are relatively new, and the applicant wants to continue to use those. They are proposing to replace that, and I'll let them go into their reasoning. And then the last is the trash enclosure, just making sure that the gates are steel and they're 100% opaque. The ones that proposed had some opening, and we just been consistent about recommending 100% opaque on trash enclosures. Happy to answer any questions. Guess I didn't show you the building elevations. Like I said, these are what you saw at the zoning stage.
Any questions for Jason? Thank you. Applicant, please.
I'm Heidi Wessels. I'm the Executive Director for Neighborhood Development Corporation. 210 Des Moines Street, Des Moines, Iowa. Actually, I'm going to turn, we're really excited about this project, and just so you know, we've had multiple neighborhood meetings. And I just keep sending emails and updates, and but we do. And Nadine Hogate sits on our board of directors, and so that's one of our priorities. Is, you know, we don't always agree on things, but we try really hard to sit down with the neighbors and make sure there's an understanding. But I do want to turn it over to Abby Gilmore. Abby is new to Neighborhood Development Corporation, and she is our project manager, and is just going to talk really quickly about the only challenge that we have with one small little thing. So, thank you.
All right, thanks, Heidi. Again, my name is Abby Gilroy. I'm project manager for Neighborhood Development Corporation at 210 Des Moines Street. And like Heidi said, I'm going to reiterate that we are very excited about this project. I think it's a great use for the site. It's going to accommodate both commercial and residential tenants. We're improving the site immensely, as Jason described. You know, just the landscaping alone, and the site's going to be very lush, very green, much more appealing to the eye than it is now. Improving pedestrian circulation. It's going to be very pedestrian friendly. We're tying a sidewalk in here on the south end. Right now that sidewalk doesn't go anywhere, it just stops. So we're going to tie that in to the neighborhood and just make it a lot more appealing to motorists and pedestrians, which I know is the city's vision for 2020. So the one item that did come up that we had, that Jason touched on and Heidi mentioned, is the sidewalk to the east of our property. I took a picture. It's kind of hard to see here, but the history on this is we've never included this in our scope of work. We were not going to replace this sidewalk. It hadn't come up in city comments or in the comments that we had received back, but I did get a call from Eric Lundy late last week mentioning that he would like to see the sidewalk extended and widened to 6 foot. The reason we hadn't planned to do anything is this summer, this ramp was just replaced by the city and put in, and the city had done some patchwork on the sidewalk as well. So we were hoping to reuse that, obviously, since it's just a few months old. And also, as you continue north, you can see in this picture, it's a 4-foot wide sidewalk stretch past the new development to the north of us, that Southview Senior Housing, I believe, all the way up to McKinley School, which is where I stopped measuring. But we believe this is in line with what the rest of the corridor looks like at this time. We did look at doing a 6-foot sidewalk. We weren't completely opposed to that. So we asked our engineer to look at some options. How can we tie into a 4-foot wide ramp? That wasn't possible and still meeting the city standards. So what we want to do to hopefully meet in the middle is replace the sidewalk, because it does look to be in poor condition, but do it in a 4-foot wide stretch to tie in with the rest of the sidewalk there, and reuse the ramp that has been put in. Also with this, our major concern here is this sidewalk edge is at the back of right-of-way, so we cannot go further west with it. We have to go east 2 feet. If we do that, this ramp has to extend out, and that's going to get us outside your pedestrian walkway and really into this radius of a turnoff of Southeast 6. So it's a big safety concern for us, our patrons, our tenants, and I would imagine probably for the city as well. So I don't think what we're asking is out of line. We're just looking to find some middle ground, I guess, on this item.
Thank you, Abby.
Sure, any questions?
How is this project funded?
I'll have Heidi answer that.
Neighborhood Development Corporation is a 501c3.
Right.
And so we have obviously funds. So we're in our pro forma stages right now, so we will finance a portion of the project and then pay for the rest of it out of our.
I guess what I'm getting at is it really necessary to tear up the sidewalk that's existing just because they don't match colors?
Well, what we want to do is, just so you know, we're putting a significant financial piece into this neighborhood. It is not an inexpensive project. And so we also don't want to make, if we see that sidewalk is looking kind of nasty, we want to make sure that it looks good. As far as so we would take out anything that is existing, maybe that stretch between the ramp and the ramp, and make it look better.
Back, please?
Sorry.
Sure, absolutely.
But what we didn't want to do when we started,
that doesn't look nasty to me.
Well, you
I don't
have
know.
to. It's not horrible, but if you actually get out there and you walk it,
that looks like it needs to be replaced.
There are some. And I do believe when we get into site work, that there may be, some stuff there. So we're not opposed to that. But what we did see was, the city and the dollars, when we started to see public works staff out on our site, near our site, I made a call right away because I didn't know exactly the scope of work and wanted to make sure that if there was a scope of work that was going to come up the street that we weren't tearing things up on each other's plans. And so I called right away and found out that the scope was limited for the curb and replacement piece, but they had already put in the new ramps. And really I know that's been an incredible cost burden to the city of Des Moines with putting all those ramps in. So that would be, our only request is that, we want to do what's right and be in compliance with everything, but we'd like to try to just, considering everything and the new development to the north of there is 4 feet. We just, for that specific piece, we'd like to make it look nice and tie in. But and the traffic light too, right there, is kind of an issue because you're kind of trying to pour concrete around it, and it just starts to get weird. So
I do need to speak
Joanne?
to that as well. I'm sorry. Part
Their
of that
only
is-
request is along Southeast 6th.
yeah, that's it.
Well, and part of the
That
condition-
little piece is just about the width of this room.
I know. Correct.
So I find it incredible, considering the fact also that this is a very old neighborhood, and I'm not seeing it.
You're not seeing what?
Seeing what?
I'm not seeing a 6-foot walk there.
Okay.
I'm ready to vote.
I am too.
Thanks, Mike. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
We have some nog afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Yes. Go ahead.
Do you feel confident that you could negotiate something with staff that we could let the staff approve administratively relative to this?
Just approve it with a 4-foot walk. Yeah. I think it's fine.
Sold.
Okay. Now, I just want to mention, it does talk about, Jason, can you please clarify this for me? Was this in question as well? In this comment, I can't tell.
Yeah, they're just going to strike 3. So
Okay, all right, we're covered. Thank you.
Be striking condition number 3.
You can't move staff.
We're not doing it yet. We haven't closed the public hearing, but we are now. The public hearing is closed. They don't need any rebuttal. I'm ready for a motion.
So delete condition number 3.
strike 3.
Strike 3. Mike moved to strike condition 3. Any discussion? Then we'll vote on Mike's motion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? No opposed. It passed.
Hey, thanks a lot. These last 3 hours have been wonderful.
You see the importance of communicating with your neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sad on it.
Would you like to be threatened by the city council?
Where's my agenda?
Only been 2.
Last year,
I just felt
Committee and director
I got a
reports.
letter from the city saying that my
Hey, director?
cracked and need to be repaired within a certain time.
Tomorrow is a P&Z lunch with the city manager. We need to know who intends to attend the lunch tomorrow. Typically, there's 3.
Bag. I can go.
Noon.
I can go.
lunch tomorrow, Ted?
No.
Greg? Hey,
No. Be drinking
Yes.
by
I
now.
can't.
I can go. Since I'm on the executive committee, I probably ought to go.
I work in retail. They'll be ordering lunch in the morning, so we order it like 8 when we get in. We notify them and they order it.
Joel had the nominating committees,
Oh, yes, he did.
and he left and asked me to advance the
we'll
slate.
talk about that as soon as we're done with this.
Just trying to get before people leave.
Okay, so
CJ said enough.
Greg?
Enough.
Greg and Jackie.
Anyone else? Greg and Jackie. I'm not sure Dan can make it tomorrow. He was talking ahead of time.
Okay.
Well, let them know in the morning if anyone else can.
The only other thing I had is that the RNO will meet next Wednesday. The sign
Signs.
regulations were referred back to RNO.
That'll be fun.
It will be fun.
So we'll be going into that starting next Wednesday.
Do we have anything, I guess I have a question. Do we have anything to do with Veterans Memorial Auditorium? Where's that county?
It's not happening.
But
Not
because,
us.
they're doing the sign
They
thing
changed
too.
the name to
Oh, my
Community.
goodness.
They got rid of Veterans Memorial, and it's Community Choice Credit Union
Oh, yeah.
Convention Center.
No, it's not.
That's what it says.
It's not.
Community Choice Credit Union Convention Center.
Credit Union Convention Center.
They took out the Veterans Memorial.
Ted has the floor.
But Bob Brownell just said on Facebook that they did not change the name of it.
Oh, good.
Thank you, because I
But it was
thought,
fun to
oh
talk
my
about.
goodness, we thought social media issue. Really?
I want that Facebook deal in the official record.
Ted is standing in for Joel about the nominating committee.
So the slate of candidates are Dan for chair, Greg, second chair, and Mike Simonson as third chair, right? Third in line. So everybody's moving up one with Kent leaving and moving Mike onto the slate. So do we need to vote on that?
You'd vote on it at your next next meeting.
Okay.
Or your first meeting of January, so this would be the slate.
You present the candidates
and you vote.
You want to move the slate tonight?
Yeah.
And then you vote on it at the next meeting?
Okay. That's the slate.
He's moving the slate, so do we have to vote on it?
Do we still have a quorum?
Yes, we do. Ted moved the slate. Anyone need that repeated, or we'll vote on it? Those in favor of the slate, raise your right hand.
It'll be, elections will be held at the next meeting.
Thank you.
It never has been, CJ.
The commission?
No, those chair seats.
Yeah, Marilyn, I think Marilyn Staples was the second vice chair for.
We would love to have you raise your hand.
CJ?
And volunteer.
I'll bet Mike Simonson would give you $1,000 to take his spot.
Yeah, he would.
No, I want the Gingrich offer.
She wants the 10,000.
Other committees, R&O is going to meet next Wednesday. And other than that, I think we are adjourned.
Happy Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Haven't seen you around in a while. Where have you been? New look, you found yourself.